Welcome to the listeners of TALRadio English, CXO Showtime. We bring in global CXOs on this platform to share their journey to success. Our guest today is Jason Bergmann, Executive Director of Operation Bootstrap Africa, a 57-year-old Minnesota-based nonprofit rooted in the bootstrap philosophy of helping people help themselves. OBA creates opportunities for people in Africa to advance their lives and communities through education, healthcare, sustainable agriculture, and other long-term development projects. Over the years, Jason has been an entrepreneur, professional photographer, and a pilot, among other roles, but has also found his calling in international development. Jason is also a husband, a family man, and a proud father of three young girls. Welcome, Jason. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. I look forward to it.
Jason, you have studied in Kenya and Tanzania, right? Were they instrumental in your efforts to work for the people of Africa?
Had the opportunity to do some grad work in Africa, but when I came back to the United States, Africa was still calling. It was kind of a crazy situation. It was something internal that just called to me, and I couldn't deny it. So I had the opportunity to get back to start work in development, working with Heifer International. And then when I had the opportunity to get back to Africa with Operation Bootstrap, I jumped on that opportunity.
And OBA seems to be having a very interesting story behind it. Can you share it with all of our listeners?
Tanzania got independence in 1965. The new president of Tanzania realized that in order for the country to be able to thrive and keep up in a modern economy, they're going to need an educated population. However, he didn't have the funds to do that. So he turned to our founder, Reverend David Simonson, and asked if he could help build schools. And he took that challenge, and over the last 57 years, we've built over 3,000 schools and small clinics throughout mainly Tanzania, but also other East African countries, Central East African countries. Back then, it was much different. Our work began with providing a simple brick press where the local community would mix a cement concoction, clay and dirt, and then they would press the brick and let the sun bake it, and that's would be the construction material for the school. Since then, and I guess it's probably good, Tanzania has since implemented building requirements to where you have to use more conventional concrete blocks. So the cost of building a school has gone up significantly, but the need is still there. And those original schools, you can about imagine what a mud block building, they have a life, a longevity of 15, maybe 20 years, even if they're kept up well. And so we're able to now provide, strong, modern school buildings.
OBA has been running for about 50 long years, right? And what was the strength that made it possible?
Pure determination and a will and a sense of vocation to serve my forefathers. I'm standing on very broad shoulders. The directors that have come before me did a lot of work. They worked passionately, and they did it out of a love of the people and a love of service, and the love of the Lord. And so they were able to continue through very difficult times, and sometimes it wasn't quite as difficult, but they were able to continue on. Sometimes out of just will. Our forefathers would barnstorm around the country, taking donations from churches and individuals, and then go back to Africa, start building schools. Today, it's a little bit different, but I still go around the country fundraising, and about twice a year, I go back to Africa and ensure that all our projects are working as expected.
I think the focus is more on uplifting girls by providing education. What kind of educational programs have been taken to ensure this objective is met?
I don't think it's any secret that if you want change, you educate girls. And the women are very motivated. Their first priority are always their children. And so if they are able to start a business, or if they're able to get a job with a paycheck, That money is invested in the family and in the community. And so that is the best way in developing countries around the world to make a difference. We have found time and time again that when you give young people a chance, they're going to grab onto it. We have a quick story. A couple of years ago, just before COVID, I went to Tanzania to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Maasai Girls' School. This is a boarding school set up in a culture that's a very, very old and a very, very traditional culture. And oftentimes the girls would be married, 11, 12, 13 years old. Nowadays, fathers usually allow them to get through primary school before they get married, but that still brings them to about 13 years old when they take a husband and start having a family. When we, at this anniversary celebration, there was a group of women from the first graduating class, and they were dressed in black. They differentiated themselves from the rest of the group by dressing in black and then adorned themselves with Maasai jewelry. Well, after all the ceremony, I saw a group of them standing together in a circle, and I went over and introduced myself, and I asked them if they would introduce themselves and what they're doing now. Well, it was absolutely amazing. It was amazing for a couple of reasons. One of which is that these girls, this first graduating class, these girls came out of the bush. They had not seen light bulbs. They didn't know what glass windows were. They were very straight out of the bush. They came in knowing their mother language. In Tanzania, there is 125 tribes, of which they all have their own language. So they are born and raised with their mother tongue. Then the first president said, we need a way to connect our people from the south to the north. We need one language to be able to connect. So Kiswahili was adopted as the official language so that they could trade from, people in the south could trade with people in the north and vice versa. But then when they come to secondary school, everything is taught English. So they have their mother tongue. They have Kiswahili as the language of trade, and then English is the language of education. So when these girls are coming from the bush, they may have some use of Swahili, but now everything is taught in English. And so they have a cultural barrier. They have a linguistic barrier. And to be honest with you, if you drop me in, we'll say Germany, and you try teaching me algebra in German, I'm going to struggle. But this is exactly what these girls had to overcome. In addition to the fact that their fathers and uncles would simply come onto campus and take the girls because they're getting married tomorrow. The fathers are very motivated because of the bride price of 4 or 5 cows, which is a lot of wealth. So these girls overcame a lot of challenges and oftentimes giving up everything, including relations with their family, with their village. They were paradigm changers. They were trailblazers. When I was meeting these women, I learned that one was a teacher, giving back to her community. One was a social worker. There was an architect, a graphic designer. There was a lawyer. There was a doctor. There was a pilot. And actually, there was one woman she was shy. She was perhaps a little bit maybe embarrassed because of her very successful classmates. She was kind of hiding behind, so I asked her to introduce herself and what she's doing, and she said that she's a pastoralist, which means that she went back to the village. She went back to the traditional way of life. I said, that is not to be ashamed of. That is exactly what the school was set up for, to give girls an opportunity to learn about the world around them, to postpone marriage and childbirth so their bodies can grow old enough and strong enough to be able to do that. You are exactly what the school was designed for. These doctors and pilots and social work, those are just great achievers, but you are success. Well, it was a couple of days later, I was at the airport and I was very tired after a couple of weeks of hard work in the bush and traveling. And we had, I was dragging my bag along, and all of a sudden I heard somebody yelling behind me, "Director, director." And I look around and someone talking to me, and it was her. She comes running up to me and she gives me a big hug and she says, "Do you remember me?" And I say, "Yes, of course I do." And we're talking, and then I realized where we were. We were at the airport. So, what are you doing at the airport? And this woman who was embarrassed because she was a simple pastoralist, she was a Maasai mother, she was being globally recognized for her work at Oxford University in London. And I just laughed. I said, of course you were. This is just one example of one graduating class from this one school of when you empower, in this case, these young women with education, they grab onto it with both hands, despite all the challenges they have to overcome with such amazing success, such determination to succeed. It's humbling. It's an honor to be in their presence.
Such a beautiful story. Thanks a lot, Jason, for bringing that up for us. And indeed, it's something a very, very valuable thing for anyone to carry their traditions and all for the future generations, because that is what is the essence of lives all over the globe, right? To get all those different flavors of one's individuals, communities, and take it to the next level or the next generation. Having talking about it, I mean, with a lot of local work or working with the local communities and all, you must have faced also. It doesn't come so easy for anything that we do, right? You must have faced a lot of challenges. How was it? What type of challenges were you facing, and how difficult was it to kind of get to a level where you are at the moment?
There are a lot of challenges. There's cultural, social, there's environmental. I mean, you can just, throw a dart at the wall and you'll hit challenges. But to answer your question specifically, a lot of times it's cultural, where there's a lot of pushback for educating girls. Culturally, they're supposed to get married, they're supposed to be making babies, and that's their expectation. And so there was a lot of pushback in educating specifically girls. I shared some examples of the success, and there are still many examples. I have another story where a girl had called our headmaster, and as the story unfolded, she had noticed she was at home in the boma, and she had noticed early in the morning there were some relatives around the boma, but she didn't think too much of it at that point. Midday, there was probably 10 or 15, and at sunset, there had to have been close to 50 people around the boma. And she asked, "Mama, what's going on?" She goes, "Oh, I forgot to tell you. You're getting married tomorrow." She was able to respond by saying, "Well, Mama, if I'm getting married tomorrow, then it would be appropriate then if I take a bath." And of course, her mother agreed. So she grabbed a pail and she grabbed the cell phone. And on her way out to the bush, she dropped her pail and she kept walking. And she was walking in the dark of the night in the middle of the African bush. She called the headmaster and she said, "Dr. Msinjili, please help. I'm supposed to get married tomorrow and I don't want to get married. I want to get an education." Well, at this point, it was probably 9 o'clock at night. It had been dark for a couple of hours. It would have been noticed that she's not there. So if she would go back at this point, she would be severely beaten by her father for embarrassing him. And she would be beaten by her husband's family for embarrassing them. And she would always be considered a flight risk. And so she wouldn't have the same social status and opportunities of the other wives of this gentleman. So she kept going, and she was all in for her education. She is not turning back, and she has nothing to look forward to going back. So she kept walking. And Dr. Msinjili said, "Just keep walking in the direction you are." Well, it was about midnight, and he got another call. And she said, "I hear animals." Now, this is the bush of Africa. She had heard hyenas. And a little while later, there was a lion. She could hear a lion. And if you've heard a lion in the night, they could be a mile away, but they're breathing right down your neck. And Dr. Msinjili, under what authority, I'm not sure, said that the animals will not hurt you. Just keep walking. Well, she kept walking, and about the time the sun started coming up, she could see a road. And she called the headmaster again, and she said, "I can see the road." He advised her, "If you see a car coming from your village, stay hidden. But if the vehicle is coming from the other way, flag them down and see if they'll give you a ride to the school. I'll pay whatever fees, whatever they want, but ask them if they will bring you to the school." The first vehicle, she stopped, let her in, drove her all the way to the school. In the hours that it took to get to the school, she was able to tell her story, and the driver did not want any compensation for driving her there. She gets to the school and she's, please allow me this education. I want to go to school. I don't want to get married. So it was probably 2 days later, I show up to the campus, and Dr. Msingili has his hand on his forehead and says, "Oh, Jason, I have such a challenge." And he shares the story to me. And he says, the school is full and we don't have a budget for her. Well, the other part of the story is that I had received a check from a donor. And this was a very interesting individual. And he was not the kind of person that liked to be told no. And so I had received the check. The budget was set. I didn't have the authority. I didn't have the ability to say, well, with this extra funds, we're able to take an extra girl. And he put on there, for an extra student. He put it right on the check. Well, I just left that check on my desk because I didn't want to have to explain this to the donor, that we can't just arbitrarily take extra students. And so I left it on my desk. I'll deal with that when I get back to the States. I'm listening to this story and I see the stress and the pain on Dr. Msingili's face. I said, I don't know what to do. I don't have money for the student. I said, Dr. Msingili, if I told you that we have a donor that wants to sponsor an extra student, would you have room for her? He said, oh, yes, we would make room for her. So here's yet one more case of where it seems like something greater than mankind is guiding this work sometimes. Here, this donor sent me a check saying for an extra girl, and I didn't have the time or the energy to tell him there are no extra girls. I get there, and here this girl had sacrificed her family, she sacrificed her husband, her culture, everything a young Maasai woman is supposed to do. She gave it all up for the opportunity for an education. I have the funds. Dr. Msingili says that he can find room for her. Well, of course, we're going to give her an opportunity for an education. So I'm not sure if this story answers your original question, but I think it sheds light into some of the challenges, not necessarily the challenges of OBA. I mean, yes, of course, we'll do that. But what I wanted to point out is the challenges that these young people have in getting the education, what they have given in the hopes of that opportunity for an education. We'll find donors, we'll find the money. We'll make that happen somehow, one way or another. But these kids are the ones that they really want that opportunity. Some of the other challenges, we're all coming out of a global pandemic. Hopefully we're coming out of it. In northern Tanzania, the economy is very dependent on tourism. Millions of people come to the northern Tanzania to see all the wildlife. They have beautiful national parks. And the economy is based, the gas, the vehicle mechanics, the safari drivers, the cooks and the hotels that take care of the tourists, it all stopped. Suddenly, it stopped. And the safari drivers they had gone 2 years. Last time I was there, they had gone almost 2 years without one day of work. An urban school, there's 1,400 kids there. 1,400 children, and they come to school at 7 o'clock in the morning. They go home about 3:30 in the afternoon. Pretty typical around the world. But there was no food nor water on this campus. And now with the economy struggling as it is, a meal at home is not assumed. We were able to start a lunch program at this school, the Old Choki Primary School in Arusha. And the way that program was started is that OBA would pay for the groceries, but it was real important to us that the parents, that the community has a little skin in the game. So the parents were going to pay for the cooks and the firewood. It was about a 80-20 split. OBA would pick up 80% of the cost and the parents would pick up 20%. When the economy dropped, this poor community was devastated and the parents couldn't afford. And so the cooks continued to cook the meals for the children, even without payment. they were volunteering because they believed that was important. And so OBA, for a short time, had agreed to take the parents' portion as well. And so that we're able to help them, and the cooks get paid, and there's firewood available, and so that they're able to continue feeding these kids, especially now during COVID, when a meal is certainly not assumed at home, certainly not every day. So when we talk about challenges, yeah, I mean, goodness, over the last 57 years, you can just about imagine the challenges that have popped up. And these stories are just of the last couple of years. You're constantly battling politics and culture and economics and health. Goodness, COVID in Africa, COVID in developing countries. For the listeners in a developed country in the United States or Europe or in wealthy communities around the world, COVID is certainly a challenge. In the United States, we've been able to social distance to some degree. We've been able to adjust our work schedules to work from home. Masking is, masks are relatively inexpensive, and we're able to not only make sure that our population has masks, many people have made them fashion statements. We were able to provide testing at no cost and vaccines at no cost. But in developing countries, that's not the case. In Tanzania, Kenya, Madagascar, where OBA does most of our work, there's no such thing as social distancing. Now, the one thing is that, most people live outside, and you just come into the house basically to cook when the weather's bad and then to sleep. But in a home of, we'll call it 3 meters or by 15 feet, you could have 6 or 8 people sleeping in that home. And so, there's no social distancing. And there's certainly no working from home. Internet is a luxury very few people have available to them. And then to have a job where you could actually connect digitally is non-existent. And so, and then even the masking is very difficult. We were able to provide our schools with, it was an attempt for PPE, right? We were able to provide wash basins and buckets with spigots for washing hands and hand sanitizer by the 55-gallon barrel. We were able to provide a lot of masks, but culturally, they didn't want to wear them. Economically, they couldn't afford them. And even at our schools where we provided masks for the students, it was really difficult. And even here in the United States, it is a big challenge trying to get kids to wear a mask. And so all the tools that the United States and Western nations use to protect themselves from COVID, pretty much none of them, other than the hand washing, could effectively be used. And so COVID came in. It did what it did. Some people got sick, many people worse than that. And then tomorrow happened. And so then you start again. And guess what? Here's another day. And you just do what you can, and you hope to find enough resources for today. And then hopefully you have enough for today and a little bit to share with somebody else. And that is the daily goal for millions and millions of people around the world. Just enough for today.
And then more importantly, right, you did bring out the real ground challenges that you have, not just about COVID, right? If you think about the healthcare system altogether in Tanzania, there must be a lot of gaps that you must have seen as part of the overall project that you're working on. How is Bootstrap Africa actually working in addressing those gaps?
What we're doing, you have to have a sense of what the need is. You have to have a sense of what is going on there. In the United States, we have a terrible nursing shortage. Our ratio is about 1,000 patients to every nurse. And that's horrible. Hopefully that will get better and better. But in Tanzania, the ratio is 1 nurse to 5,000 patients. When you are as poor as you are, it's a hand-to-mouth economy. The idea of a doctor is, it's a dream. That would be really nice. I mean, my child is very sick. I'd love to bring my child to the doctor, but you have no way of paying for it. you may not even have a way of, the doctor or the clinic or the hospital is a long ways away. So you'd have no way of even bringing your child to the doctor, much less doctoring yourself. I mean, you're not going to spend those kind of resources on yourself. So how can a small nonprofit in the United States make an impact in East Central Africa? The way we have evolved is that we have built many small clinics, but we've evolved a little bit. We now have a nursing college where we train nurses. And the motto is to train competent and caring nurses. And so you might have trained nurses, but they might know how to, be very proficient at giving injections or taking blood pressure, but it's not necessarily the sense of compassion. And so the school, its focus is on compassionate, competent nurses. And now the school is, I would say about 7 years old. And we have a 100% pass rate for, the equivalent of the United States boards, the nursing boards. And we're very proud of that. And I think that has a lot to do, again, what we talked about before is empowering Africans to care for themselves. Not that OBA has the answer for everything. It's not that OBA comes in and does it for them. We give them the tools so that they can do it themselves. Give them the tools to make the changes they want to see in their country. We're establishing an endowed scholarship for doctors. Unfortunately, we lost a medical missionary, a dear friend and mentor, just recently passed away. Just months after retiring, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor and just recently passed. And to honor his life's work, we've established an endowed scholarship where we will be training doctors into the future. And we'll be able to train the young college graduates to become doctors, and we'll also be able to provide specialty training for current doctors who need to specialize in different areas, surgical, anesthesia, whatever it might be. Cancer treatment. Midwifery would be under the nursing school, but addressing the needs. And again, it would be the Tanzanians identifying the need, and then we just simply walk with them, kind of giving them the tools to succeed.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, sorry to hear about his story. I mean, may God be with him wherever he is. And
Yes.
he has given some motivation to carry over his work. I believe his energy will always be with everybody involved to kind of get to where we want to. Now, Jason, so it's getting to my mind now. I've been thinking all about the story that you just provided about the girl who was walking through the forest, right? And how everything worked in our favor. Like there was already somebody who was ready to donate or ready to basically be responsible for uplifting one additional girl, right? It is not a coincidence, as you were talking about. It's something which is more than human or a mankind. And that's a very powerful statement that you have made, and I echo your thoughts on that. But in addition to that, what I also look at is the sheer grit and determination of the girl, right? And
Yes.
her energy to walk through the forest late in the night, a will to make sure that she want to do something in her life, right? Which is very important. And I believe that doesn't come out of the blue. I believe it is all coming up with the education system that OBA is providing. I'd like to know more about the education management work that you're doing with Maasai Girls School in several areas in Tanzania, including Manjuli, and I will love to hear more because it is certainly something which is very powerful. I believe the foundation of the overall OBA is to ensure and strengthen every Tanzanian with education. So, any more insights on that? Would certainly like our listener to be more fortunate to get to know those stories as well.
Holds true in Tanzania and Kenya. We have schools going on in Kenya, Tanzania, and Madagascar right now. And it holds true. We're able to use school construction, develop the relationship with the community. So we have the ability to provide something that is outside of their realm of opportunity by themselves. That starts the communication. That communication starts prior to that, of course, but that solidifies the relationship. And it shows that Operation Bootstrap Africa and Jason is committed to this community, and we want you to succeed. Otherwise, it's just words, right? So we're able to make a capital investment, but then the conversation continues. And it's never, you need to do this. It's what are your challenges and how are you going to overcome these challenges? And I think this is really important to understand. OBA is walking with, shoulder to shoulder, not doing it for them. And that the capital investment, again, is just one tool to show our commitment to walking with them. They're African schools run by Africans, but we have constant communication back and forth. And we have seen things, I've been at this for a while, and having schools in different areas, we've seen a lot of different things. And so when they come to us with a challenge, we'll be able to say, well, what are you going to do? And then they, as a group, either the school, the administration, and the teachers, or the whole community, they get together and they try to figure out, well, what is the solution? And then perhaps OBA can help with some capital, either money or construction, or we can bring in another NGO that has expertise in this subject. But it's certainly not OBA just throwing out advice and demanding you have to do it this way or that way. It's a conversation. It's a walk in which we do together. I think that's very, very important. I'm not African. I don't understand. I will never know their culture to the level that they do. I will never understand the environment to the level that they do. In Madagascar, I made my first visit a couple of years ago, or about a year ago now, and they had constructed schools out of sticks. They wove sticks together and then with a thatched roof. And in some ways, it was very pleasant in there because there was some breeze and some shade, but it doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold up to rain very well. And they have actually, right now, they have a hurricane coming through and their schools, their homes just get blown over. So what they decided is that they need a brick school building. So we finished a brick school building. And I just got a message yesterday that they are using that. It just got finished. The furniture, or the school desks were put in maybe a week ago, and now they're using it as a hurricane shelter. And the community is sheltering in there. At that point, the rain hadn't even started. It was just the wind, and the wind was destroying all of their buildings and left them with no shelter. So it's, in many ways, the school is a center of community, and it can be the motivator to challenge the community to work together on other issues, other projects. This area of Madagascar has been suffering through a drought and, as a result, a famine. One of the other things that they had requested, is there any chance that we'd be able to have a well? And so when you start talking about well, you have to unload all the issues that come around a well, because wells are mechanical. So if we put in a well, what kind of pump? What's appropriate? Who's going to fix it if it goes out? Who's going to pay for the repairs if it goes out? All of this has to be done through the community. Jason can't say, you fix it, and Jason can't say, I will repair it every time it breaks down. Then it's my well. We want to make sure that this is the community's well. And since the school is built and the well is, we hope to start the well, but now the community is working together and they have identified the need for reforestation. They want to hold the water on their plots of land. And so we talked about different sustainable agricultural techniques, where if you plant your seeds in a tub, or you make a berm around your garden, and then you focus all your energies, your fertilizer, your water, your seeds in this one specific area, maybe 2 meters around, then when you're able to focus your energies on that, then you can start another one. But don't try planting, an acre of maize knowing that it's going to fail because you have no way of watering it. You have no way of fertilizing it. The other thing is that they want to start introducing trees again. So we're going to introduce a nursery. So one of the people, and it's probably going to be a widow in the community, she's already been identified by the community. She's taking care of other people's children. So she's kind of an orphanage. And but she has, very little resources. So we'll be able to pay her to get a nursery started, in which she will start with seeds, and then she'll grow a number of different kinds of trees that will then be dispersed around the community. She'll grow a tree for wood, a wood tree, so that they will be able to harvest that in years to come for firewood. They're going to grow shade trees so that they can protect the soil. It doesn't get sterilized by the baking sun. It's able to provide some shade, and it's able to then hold a little more moisture, and they're able to retake some of the fertility or build the fertility in the soil. And then also food trees. And so they'll have a number of different trees they've identified that are edible. And so they'll be able to utilize that during times of drought and famine. So it's the community that is working together. And OBA is just the catalyst. And we can help organize the conversation without saying, you have to do this. And without saying, well, if you do this, we'll pay for that. That's not the method. It's about empowering the community.
Absolutely. And then you have come a long way in constructing more than 3,000 schools. It's a big achievement. Congratulations to the whole team of OBA. Having said that, right, I mean, how culturally different is Maasai tribe? And you have been doing all these initiatives in terms of ensuring reforestation again and trying to get the wells going to ensure there is clean water available for the tribe. And you must have come into or run into other challenges and roadblocks to make the progress. How was it?
Okay, first of all, there's the cost, right? So we'll just use clean drinking water. So we were out in an area, it's higher elevation, but very, very poor. And so we visited the school, and the school was crumbling. They had started the foundation for extra classrooms. Right now they have 3 classrooms for 7 different grades, different forms. They had to share the room. The older students would come in the afternoon, the younger ones in the morning. And then they showed us the kitchen. This particular community, the children had to bring water and for their lunch program. And the teacher poured out some of the water, and it was white and clumpy. Puts a little throw up in my mouth just thinking of it right now. They get their water. It's an open water source miles away from their homes, miles away from their school. And it's an open water source where they bathe. That's where their cattle water. That's where their cattle get water. This is where they get their drinking water. It is horrible. And so we are looking at putting in a well in that community. Well, just yesterday, I'm looking at a copy of the check. We had some generous donors who said, I see the value of putting a well in there, in that community. And I shared the information about this community with them and showed them some of the pictures. And they said, yes, we want to do this. So one challenge is funding. And then the next area, this is in the mountains. This is an old volcanic area. Unlike where I'm at in Minnesota, if you go down 100, 150 feet, you'll find water almost anywhere. Some places might be a little bit more challenging, but some places are much easier. You can go down, 4 meters and you're going to find all the water you want in some areas of Minnesota. But in this area, in the volcanic areas of northern Tanzania, it's not so. You can drill 300 feet or 100 meters and not find any water. Or if you do find water, it might be salty. And so it's very, very challenging. And so you go through, we work with very competent teams who have a lot of experience in the area. And they're able to use technology. They use topographical maps. They're able to use maps of other wells in the area, a lot of experience. But they also have ground penetrating radar, which will show the contour underneath the soil. And then using that information, they're able to determine the likelihood of a well in this particular spot. Now that there's a well there, then you have to work with the community and who owns the well, who's responsible for it. Do they have to protect it? Do they have to protect it from other people? Do they have to protect it from theft? Do they have to protect it from their livestock? How do we address those needs? How do we make sure that we don't just something as simple as pulling the water spigots away from the well site so that contaminants don't work their way down to the aquifer. The cattle can be watered, run a hose and build a trough for the cattle, 100 meters from the well. So, there's a lot of things you have to think about and work with the community. We have a lot of experience saying that, you have to, it really needs to be done this way. It has to be the community coming to that understanding themselves.
That also tells that what I've read and heard about Tanzania, agriculture certainly seems to be one of the core occupations. And I know that OBO is certainly taking a lot of steps forward for a sustainable agriculture. One of the things is like developing wells, right? Providing or making water available. Are you also taking steps in educating the farmers in terms of how to go about farming or crop rotation so that they can basically evolve by leveraging certain technologies that what we are seeing in the modern world?
We do schools, right? We do education. And so OBA is not hosting seminars out in the field. However, sometimes we do get to do that, but for the most part, we're empowering Tanzania through schools, right? So we have an agricultural school in Babate, which is a kind of a northern central town. This particular area of Tanzania has good rain, it has good agriculture, but the environment is changing. A lot of people use terms climate change, and it's really felt in marginal communities the most. They have 2 rainy seasons. If they don't get what's predicted, or if it comes at a different time, they will plant their crops in anticipation for what they call the short rains. And so the short rains, the maize or whatever, the beans, the squash, whatever it is they're growing, they time it so that the plants start coming up, and then we get the rains, and that rain will bring the plant, to almost to maturity. And then there's a long stretch of dry. And so they hope that there's enough moisture. So now if those rains come late, the seeds sprout, the plants come up, they're 6 inches tall, and then they wither. The rains didn't come. Well, what do we do? And so, some of the things that our schools are talking about is different crops, something that has a little more flexibility, different techniques. Drilling a well is good, but we're finding around the world that we're also, drying up our aquifers. And so it's not necessarily, we would like to be able to find a solution other than just, using a well for irrigating your crops. You need to talk about, crop rotation, doing swales, trying to hold the water back, trying to get the water to soak in on your soil versus running down the hill. Just doing things. What can we do, noting the resources that are available to us? And so it's a great challenge, and it's a moving target. It seems like the weather is changing, the climate is changing, and it's unpredictable.
First of all, Tanzania itself is like there is a lot of people who are in need. But we also see that there are an additional set of children with special needs that require special attention. How is OPA involved in addressing such requirements?
This one is tough. I'm a father of young children, and so fortunately everyone's healthy and are doing well, but that's not always the case, right? Amongst our population, our global population, there's a certain percentage of children with Down syndrome, children with learning disabilities in poor communities around the world, but even more specifically in rural sub-Saharan Africa. It can be looked at a little bit differently. We have a certain understanding of science in the US that may not be understood in the bush. So for example, if your child is born with Down syndrome, it may be considered a curse upon the parents, or maybe the grandparents, or it might even be a curse moving forward. And so without an understanding of what's going on, they just turn to the world and try to find explanations. And so now if your child is cursed, you don't want that upon your family. And so unfortunately, a lot of times the kids are abandoned or left, even if they don't harm or dispose of the children. If you have limited resources in your family, you're more likely to give the resources to the children who are more likely to succeed, right? This child is strong and they're smart, and so we're going to do what we can to help this one so that they can succeed. And then hopefully they would be able to help take care of mom and dad as mom and dad get older. And then, of course, then there are fewer resources for the children that are not as likely to succeed. So we work with a number of schools, special needs schools, and it just provides them opportunity for education. It provides them a safe place to grow up and a safe place to learn. Deaf children, deaf girls are very vulnerable to attack, to sexual assault. And so, we have boarding at a lot of the schools so that the girls can stay there and be safe. The deaf children learn a language in which they can communicate to each other, and the parents are encouraged to learn some sign language so that they have a way of communicating with their family and their community. It might be, we had mentioned Down syndrome or, other learning disabilities. And so there's just a great, safe place with amazing teachers. Unfortunately, the government doesn't have a lot of money. And so they're not, just something as simple as providing 3 meals a day for these children is a challenge. And so a lot of times, in addition to supporting with education materials or classrooms or the like, we'll subsidize their diet. And we'll provide them a little bit of money so that they can have some vegetables and some meat in their diet and supplement the nutrition at the school.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. One last question. What is OBA Book Club?
So we do a twice-a-year newsletter, and we're able to, in that newsletter, we share books that talk about the challenges, books that celebrate the culture. It's just an opportunity for us to share with the folks some of the things that we're reading and we find of value, and encourage people to educate themselves on the challenges of Africa, of sub-Saharan Africa. So the last one that was in our book club was written by a Nobel Prize winner. He was actually Kenyan, and it talks about the struggles of a young boy who grew up in a very challenging time, and it is a great story. So it's an opportunity for us to share both difficult stories and uplifting stories that we think our friends would enjoy reading.
Absolutely. I believe it's a very wonderful program for generations to come, especially for the young kids in Africa. Jason, we wish you all the courage to keep achieving many more milestones for the people of Africa and the world in general. Thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure. It's my honor. That's my responsibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are honored to have you on our show. Thank you, Jason.